Have you ever thought about someone you haven't spoken to in years, and then your phone buzzes and it's them? Or you're humming a song you haven't heard in months, and it comes on the radio the second you turn the car on, and you say, "What are the odds of that?" And everyone around you shrugs and says, "Coincidence." But what if it's not a coincidence? What if the reason these things keep happening to you is because you're accidentally tuning into a frequency, the same way a radio dial locks onto a station? And what if you could learn to do it on purpose? Because there's a name for what's happening when your brain syncs up with another person, when your thoughts seem to reach out and pull events toward you, when the right opportunity lands in front of you at the exact right second. Physicists call it entrainment. Neuroscientists call it coherence. And the mechanism behind it is so well documented that it's been measured in laboratories, replicated in experiments, and published in peer-reviewed journals for decades. And yet almost nobody connects it to the coincidences in their daily life. This video is going to change that. We're going to walk through exactly what's happening inside your brain and body when a so-called coincidence occurs. Not vague spiritual language, not raise your vibration, with no explanation. The actual physics, the neuroscience, and the biology of why your reality seems to respond to your internal state. And by the end, you'll never look at a coincidence the same way again. Let's start with something you already know, but have probably never examined closely. You've experienced this pattern dozens of times, maybe hundreds. You're sitting on your couch and a face flashes through your mind. Someone you haven't thought about in weeks, maybe months. An old friend, an ex, a coworker from 3 jobs ago, and within minutes, sometimes seconds, your phone lights up. A text, a call, a social media notification, and it's them. Your stomach drops a little. You get that strange tingle of recognition, and then you laugh it off. You say, "That's so weird," and you move on with your day, or you're driving to a meeting and you get a sudden urge to take a different route. No logical reason, you just feel it. And later you find out there was a massive accident on the road you normally take exactly when you would have been on it. Or you've been wrestling with a problem for weeks, turning it over in your mind, and you walk into a bookstore and a book literally falls off the shelf in front of you. You pick it up. Chapter 4 is basically a blueprint for solving your exact problem. Now, if any of these had happened once, you could write it off. Random noise. Statistical probability. Given enough time and enough events, weird things are bound to happen eventually. But they don't happen once. They happen repeatedly, and they tend to cluster. They show up more during certain periods of your life and vanish during others. They increase when you're calm, focused, and clear about what you want. And they dry up almost completely when you're stressed, anxious, or scattered. That pattern alone should tell you something. If coincidences were truly random, they'd be evenly distributed across your life regardless of your mental state. But they're not. They cluster around coherence. There's actually a branch of mathematics that deals with exactly this question. Probability theory can tell you the likelihood of any single coincidence occurring by chance. Your friend calling at the exact moment you thought of them. Depending on how often you think of that person and how often they call you, the odds might be somewhere around 1 in several thousand for any given day. Improbable, but not impossible. But the problem with the "it's just statistics" argument is that it can't account for clustering. If coincidences were random, they wouldn't bunch up during certain emotional states and disappear during others. That's like flipping a coin and getting heads every time you're happy and tails every time you're sad. At some point, you have to stop calling it a fair coin. Statistician David Hand at Imperial College London wrote an entire book about this called The Improbability Principle. He argued that extremely improbable events are actually inevitable given enough opportunities. And he's right, on a population level. Somewhere on Earth right now, someone is experiencing a 1 in a million coincidence. But Hand's model doesn't explain why the same individuals report these events repeatedly, or why those individuals share specific psychological profiles, high openness, regular contemplative practice, strong interoceptive awareness. Random events don't have a personality type preference. Frequency locking does. And there's one more thing about these experiences that nobody talks about. The feeling. When a genuine coincidence happens, when you get that phone call or find that book or run into that person, there's a physical sensation that comes with it, a kind of full body recognition, a feeling in your chest that something just clicked into place, like two puzzle pieces snapping together. Your nervous system recognizes the match before your conscious mind can explain it. That sensation isn't meaningless. It's actually a signal from your autonomic nervous system indicating that an entrainment event has occurred. And that brings us to the question at the center of all of this. So before we can understand frequency locking, we need to understand what frequency actually means when we're talking about the human body. Not as a metaphor, not as a spiritual buzzword, as a measurable physical phenomenon. Your brain runs on electricity. Right now, as you're hearing these words, billions of neurons in your skull are firing in rhythmic patterns, generating oscillating electrical signals that can be measured by an electroencephalogram, the EEG machines you've seen in hospitals with the electrodes stuck to someone's scalp. These electrical oscillations happen at specific frequencies, measured in hertz, which is just cycles per second. And neuroscience has mapped 5 primary brainwave bands that correspond to different states of consciousness. Delta waves oscillate between 0.5 and 4 hertz. This is deep, dreamless sleep. Your body is repairing itself. Your conscious mind is completely offline. And if someone tried to talk to you, you wouldn't hear them. Theta waves run between 4 and 8 hertz. This is the state right between waking and sleeping. The hypnagogic zone. It's where vivid imagery floods your mind, where creative insights seem to come from nowhere, and where your subconscious mind is most programmable. Neville Goddard, one of the most influential figures in manifestation philosophy, called this the state akin to sleep and built his entire system around accessing it. Alpha waves sit between 8 and 13 hertz. This is relaxed wakefulness. You're calm, you're present, you're not stressed. When people talk about being in the zone during a casual conversation or a walk in nature, they're usually in alpha. Beta waves range from 13 to 30 hertz. This is your normal waking state. Thinking, analyzing, problem solving, worrying. And if you live in a modern city, you're probably spending the vast majority of your day in beta, bouncing between to-do lists and notifications and deadlines. The higher end of beta is associated with anxiety, overthinking, and chronic stress. High beta is where your inner monologue never shuts up. It's the brainwave equivalent of a radio stuck between 2 stations, picking up static from both and playing neither one clearly. Then there's gamma, 30 hertz and above, sometimes reaching 100 or more. Gamma is associated with peak concentration, heightened perception, and moments of insight. Experienced meditators, particularly Tibetan Buddhist monks, produce massive amounts of gamma during deep meditation. And gamma is the brainwave state most correlated with reports of synchronicity and meaningful coincidence. But your brain isn't the only part of you generating electromagnetic signals. Your heart produces the largest electromagnetic field in your body. Researchers at the HeartMath Institute in Boulder Creek, California, have been measuring this for over 30 years. And what they've found is that the heart's electromagnetic field extends approximately 3 to 5 feet beyond the surface of your skin in every direction. It's detectable by sensitive magnetometers, and it carries information, actual encoded data, about your emotional state, your intentions, and your level of internal coherence. When your heart rhythm is smooth and ordered, a pattern HeartMath calls cardiac coherence, the electromagnetic signal it produces is clean and strong, like a clear radio broadcast. When your heart rhythm is jagged and erratic, which happens during stress, anger, or anxiety, the signal becomes noisy and chaotic, like a radio station full of static. And here's where it gets interesting. That field doesn't just exist around you. Other people's nervous systems can detect it. HeartMath's research has shown that when 2 people sit within a few feet of each other, one person's heart rhythm can be detected in the other person's brain waves. Your heart is literally broadcasting, and other people's brains are picking up the signal. That's not a metaphor. That's a measurement. Now add one more layer to this. The Earth itself resonates at a measurable frequency. In 1952, the German physicist Winfried Otto Schumann mathematically predicted a set of electromagnetic resonances in the cavity between the Earth's surface and the ionosphere. These resonances, now called the Schumann resonances, have a fundamental frequency of 7.83 Hz. 7.83 Hz falls exactly in the Theta brainwave range, the same range associated with deep meditation, creative insight, and heightened intuition. Your brain, at its most receptive, vibrates at the same frequency as the planet you're standing on. That convergence is not an accident, and it's directly connected to the mechanism we're about to explore. In 1665, a Dutch physicist named Christian Huygens was lying in bed, sick, watching two pendulum clocks hanging on the same wall of his Amsterdam workshop. He noticed something strange. No matter how he started them, within about 30 minutes, both pendulums would sync up. They'd swing in perfect anti-phase, one going left while the other went right, locked into a shared rhythm. He tried resetting them. He moved them to different positions. He started them at completely random times. Every single time, they synced back up. Huygens called it an odd kind of sympathy. He couldn't fully explain it with the physics available to him. But what he'd discovered was entrainment, the tendency of two oscillating systems to lock into a shared frequency when they share a medium of communication. In the case of his pendulum clocks, the medium was the wall they were mounted on. Tiny vibrations traveled through the wood, transferring energy between the two pendulums until they naturally settled into synchronization. Not because either clock decided to sync, because physics made it inevitable. And entrainment isn't limited to clocks on a wall. If you place 5 metronomes on a shared platform, a board sitting on 2 rolling cylinders, and start them all at different tempos, within a few minutes they'll all be clicking in unison. You can watch this experiment on video. It looks like magic, but it's pure mechanics. The shared platform transfers tiny vibrations between the metronomes, and the system finds its most energy-efficient state, which is synchronization. In the mangrove forests of Southeast Asia, thousands of fireflies flash in perfect unison. Not a few of them, thousands, across entire riverbanks. Each firefly has its own internal oscillator, its own flashing rhythm. But when they're close enough to see each other's flashes, their visual signals act as the shared medium, and they entrain. The whole swarm locks into one frequency. Heart cells do the same thing. If you put 2 living cardiac cells in a petri dish, close enough to sense each other's electrical impulses, they'll begin beating in sync. Not because one cell is leading, because entrainment is what oscillating biological systems do when given a channel of communication. And once you understand this, you start seeing it everywhere. Women who live together or spend significant time together often notice their menstrual cycles synchronizing. This was first documented by researcher Martha McClintock at the University of Chicago in 1971, and while the exact mechanism is still debated, the leading theory involves pheromone signaling, chemical oscillators entraining through shared air. Audiences at concerts and sporting events synchronize their heart rates. Research published in the journal Cell Reports in 2021 showed that concertgoers' heartbeats and skin conductance began to align during live musical performances, even among strangers who weren't interacting directly. The music acted as the shared medium. The entire crowd became one coupled, oscillating system. Even your breathing entrains. Sit next to someone long enough in a quiet room with no conversation, and your breathing patterns will begin to match. Therapists who work with trauma patients report that one of the first signs of therapeutic rapport is synchronized breathing between client and practitioner. Your body is full of oscillators. Your heart, your brain, your breath, even your gut has its own neural network producing rhythmic electrical patterns. And every single one of these systems is capable of entraining, of locking into frequency with other oscillating systems in its environment, including other people. This is where the science gets really compelling because we're not talking about clocks and metronomes anymore. We're talking about you sitting in a room with another human being and your biological systems quietly locking into sync without either of you knowing it's happening. In 2010, a team of neuroscientists at Princeton University, led by Yuri Hassan, published a landmark study on brain-to-brain coupling during natural communication. They had one person tell a story while lying in an fMRI scanner, measuring their brain activity in real time. Then they played the recording of that story to a listener, also in a scanner. What they found was that the listener's brain activity began to mirror the speaker's brain activity. Not in a vague way, in specific, measurable neural patterns, and the closer the mirroring, the better the listener understood the story. The most successful communication happened when the listener's brain actually started anticipating the speaker's patterns, coupling to the signal slightly ahead of time. Their brains were in training, locking into a shared frequency through the medium of language and sound. And this doesn't only happen during conversation. Researchers at the University of Valencia found that when two strangers sit in silence facing each other for just 10 minutes, their heart rhythms begin to synchronize. No words, no physical contact, just proximity and attention. Mothers and infants synchronize heart rhythms during face-to-face play. This has been documented repeatedly. The mother's autonomic nervous system and the baby's autonomic nervous system entrain through eye contact, vocal tone, and touch. This is called limbic resonance, and it's considered a foundational mechanism of emotional bonding in mammals. You've felt this, even if you didn't have the word for it. You've walked into a party and immediately felt the energy of the room. Whether it was tense or relaxed, excited or awkward, that's not imagination. Your nervous system is detecting the aggregate electromagnetic output of every person in that space and calibrating to it. You are entraining to the room before your conscious mind even forms an opinion. And then there's the phenomenon of meeting someone for the first time and feeling like you already know them. Instant familiarity, instant trust. People describe it as clicking or say, we were on the same wavelength. That language is more literal than anyone realizes. When your internal frequency, your brainwave pattern, your heart rhythm, your emotional state closely matches another person's, entrainment happens faster. The synchronization is almost immediate, and your subjective experience of that rapid entrainment is the feeling of deep recognition. The reverse is equally true. You've walked into a room and felt an immediate resistance to someone before they even opened their mouth. Something about their presence felt off, abrasive. You couldn't put it into words, but your body knew. That's also frequency information. Your nervous system detected an electromagnetic signature that was dissonant with yours, and it flagged it before your conscious mind could form a judgment. This is why first impressions are so powerful and so often accurate. They're not based on appearance or body language alone. They're based on your nervous system sampling the other person's electromagnetic field and calculating compatibility at a speed your thinking mind can't match. And here's something truly wild that's been documented in long-term relationships. Researchers at the University of California, Davis found that couples who have been together for years develop synchronized physiological patterns. Their cortisol rhythms align. Their heart rate variability patterns begin to mirror each other. When one partner experiences stress, the other's physiology responds, even when they're in different rooms. This isn't just emotional empathy. This is biological entrainment that has deepened over thousands of hours of proximity. Their oscillating systems have locked into a shared rhythm so thoroughly that they function as a coupled unit. When people say, we finish each other's sentences, or I always know when something's wrong with them, they're describing the subjective experience of a very real physiological merger. So when you think of someone and they call, something might be happening that's far less mysterious than it seems. If you and that person have entrained before, if your neural patterns have a history of synchronization, it's possible that shifts in your electromagnetic state serve as a kind of signal. Not a cell tower signal, something subtler. Something mediated by the same kind of field interactions that sync pendulums, metronomes, and heart cells. We don't have a definitive peer-reviewed paper proving that one person's thought triggers another person's phone call. That research may come or it may not. But what we do have is a clear, documented mechanism, entrainment, that shows how biological oscillators synchronize across space. And we have HeartMath's data showing that your heart's electromagnetic field is detectable at a distance, carrying encoded information about your internal state. The puzzle pieces are sitting on the table. The picture they form is hard to ignore. But even if the electromagnetic signaling between people turns out to be subtler than we currently understand, there's another mechanism behind coincidence that is beyond dispute. And it might actually be the more powerful one. Your brain is processing roughly 11 million bits of sensory information every single second. Light, sound, texture, temperature, spatial orientation, chemical signals. 11 million bits per second flooding into your nervous system through your eyes, ears, skin, nose, and tongue. Your conscious mind can handle about 50 of those bits at any given moment. That means your brain is deleting, distorting, and filtering 99.9995% of available reality before it even reaches your awareness. And the system responsible for deciding what gets through and what gets filtered out is called the reticular activating system, or RAS. The RAS sits at the base of your brainstem, and its primary job is survival-based filtering. It lets through anything that's dangerous, anything that matches your current goals, and anything that your brain has been primed to notice. Everything else gets suppressed. You've experienced the RAS in action every time you've bought a new car. The day before you bought your red Honda, you never noticed red Hondas. The day after, they were everywhere, on every highway, in every parking lot, at every intersection. Did the number of red Hondas on the road increase overnight? Obviously not. Your RAS started flagging them because they'd become relevant to your identity. Now apply that same principle to opportunities, people, and events. When you're in a clear, coherent mental state, when you know what you want, when your emotional frequency is stable and focused, your RAS begins filtering reality to match. You start noticing opportunities that were always there, but your brain was previously deleting. You hear the right sentence in a conversation that your stressed, scattered version would have completely missed. You see the job posting, the flyer, the email, the person. They were always in your environment. Your frequency determines whether your RAS lets them through. This is why coincidences cluster during periods of clarity and dry up during periods of stress. The universe isn't rewarding you for good vibes. Your filtering system literally changes the version of reality you're able to perceive based on your internal state. Stress narrows your perceptual filter to threats. Coherence opens it to opportunities. Same environment, completely different experience. And this is where things get real for a lot of people because it explains something painful that you might have noticed in your own life. Think about the last time you went through a genuinely difficult period. A breakup, a financial crisis, a health scare, a stretch of months where nothing seemed to go right and everything felt heavy. During that time, did you experience synchronicities, meaningful coincidences? Probably not. Or if you did, they felt dark. You kept running into reminders of your pain. The wrong song at the wrong time. The happy couple at the restaurant when you were eating alone. Every coincidence seemed designed to make you feel worse. That wasn't bad luck. That was your RAS doing exactly what it's designed to do, matching your perception to your internal state. When you're in chronic stress, your body floods with cortisol, and cortisol doesn't just make you feel bad. It measurably degrades your heart rate variability, which is the variation in time between each heartbeat. High heart rate variability is a marker of a flexible, coherent nervous system. Low heart rate variability is a marker of a rigid, stressed one. When your HRV drops, your heart's electromagnetic field becomes erratic and chaotic. The signal you're broadcasting loses its coherence. Instead of a clean frequency that can find resonant matches in your environment, you're putting out noise. And noise doesn't lock onto anything, it just scatters. This is why people in survival mode stop experiencing positive coincidences. Their nervous system is locked into a threat detection pattern. Their RAS is filtering for danger, not opportunity. Their heart's electromagnetic output is too chaotic to synchronize with anything around them. Their brainwaves are stuck in high beta, racing with worry, never dropping into the alpha and theta states where connections and insights naturally emerge. And the cruelest part is that this creates a feedback loop. Stress reduces coherence. Reduced coherence reduces synchronicity. Fewer meaningful coincidences reinforce the belief that life is random and hostile. That belief generates more stress, and the cycle tightens. The flip side of this is equally true and equally powerful. When you deliberately shift out of stress and into coherence, the loop reverses. Your HRV improves. Your electromagnetic signal cleans up. Your RAS opens. And suddenly, the coincidences start flowing again. Not because reality changed, because your ability to perceive and interact with it changed. Your nervous system is the antenna. Stress corrodes the antenna. Coherence sharpens it. And this connects directly to a concept in neuroscience called the default mode network. The default mode network is basically like a network of brain regions that activates when you're not focused on the external world. When you're daydreaming, mind-wandering, ruminating, or thinking about yourself in relation to the past and future. The DMN is essentially your brain's narrative engine. It's the voice in your head that's constantly constructing a story about who you are, what's happening to you, and what it all means. Research from the lab of Marcus Rachel at Washington University has shown that the default mode network and the attention networks in your brain operate on a kind of seesaw. When it's highly active, your attention to the external environment drops. When external attention is high, the default mode network activity decreases. People who meditate regularly show reduced default mode network activity and increased connectivity between attention networks and sensory processing areas. In other words, they perceive more of what's actually happening around them because their brain's storytelling engine isn't drowning out the signal. And this is consistent with one of the most common reports from long-term meditators and people who practice flow states. They experience more synchronicities, more meaningful coincidences, more moments of the right thing at the right time. Not because meditation summons magic, because a quieter default mode network means a wider perceptual aperture. You're not seeing more coincidences. You're seeing more of what was always there because your filter is no longer blocking it. Athletes describe this in the language of flow state. When a basketball player is in the zone, time slows down, the court seems to expand and they can see passing lanes that would normally be invisible. Their default mode network has gone quiet. Their attention is fully externalized. Their perceptual filter has opened wide, and they're processing far more environmental information than their normal waking state would allow. The same thing happens off the court. When you're in a state of calm, present moment awareness, whether through meditation, walking in nature, or simply being deeply engaged in something you love, your default mode network activity drops and your environmental sensitivity increases. You notice things you'd normally miss. The poster on a wall that answers your question. The conversation at the next table that contains exactly the phrase you needed. The person who walks into your life at precisely the moment you're ready for them. None of that is magic. All of it is perception, and perception is a function of frequency. Now, I want to take this one layer deeper. Because there's a domain of science that gets dismissed as irrelevant to everyday life, but which turns out to be uncomfortably relevant to everything we've been discussing. Quantum mechanics. And before you tune out because you've heard 100 spiritual teachers misquote quantum physics, stay with me. Because the research I'm about to describe isn't fringe or speculative. It's published in Nature, one of the most prestigious scientific journals on the planet. In 2007, a team led by Graham Fleming at the University of California, Berkeley published findings showing that photosynthesis, the process by which plants convert sunlight into energy, uses quantum coherence. Not at near absolute zero temperatures in a laboratory vacuum. At room temperature in wet, noisy biological conditions. Inside a leaf. The photosynthetic complex in green sulfur bacteria doesn't randomly bounce energy from molecule to molecule until it reaches the reaction center. It simultaneously explores multiple energy transfer pathways at once and selects the most efficient one. This is quantum superposition happening inside a living organism, right in front of us, in every plant on the surface of the planet. And then there are the birds. European robins navigate thousands of miles during migration using the Earth's magnetic field. In 2008, researchers at the University of Oxford proposed that they do this through a quantum mechanism in proteins called cryptochromes, located in the bird's retinas. When light hits these proteins, it creates pairs of electrons in a quantum entangled state. The entanglement is sensitive to the angle of the Earth's magnetic field, giving the bird a kind of quantum compass. This is quantum entanglement, the phenomenon Einstein called spooky action at a distance, operating inside the eye of a bird, not in a super collider, in biology. If quantum coherence operates in photosynthesis and quantum entanglement operates in bird navigation, the question is no longer whether quantum effects exist in biological systems. They do. The question is how far up the biological complexity ladder they reach, and several researchers, notably Roger Penrose and Stuart Hameroff, with their orchestrated objective reduction theory, have proposed that quantum coherence may play a role in consciousness itself, that the microtubules inside your neurons, tiny protein structures that form the internal scaffolding of brain cells, might sustain quantum states that contribute to conscious experience. This is still debated. It's not settled science. But the fact that it's being seriously discussed by physicists and published in journals tells you something. The boundary between quantum mechanics and biology, between physics and consciousness, is thinner than we were taught. And if your brain does sustain any degree of quantum coherence, then the idea that your internal state could interact with the physical world in ways that classical physics can't fully explain starts looking a lot less crazy. If this is connecting for you, hit subscribe. I break down the science behind consciousness and reality creation every week, and the next video goes even deeper into one of the mechanisms we're covering today. Now let's bring this all the way back to your actual life. Because the science is fascinating, but it's useless if you don't know what to do with it. If frequency locking is real, if your brain, your heart, and your nervous system are constantly broadcasting and receiving electromagnetic signals that interact with the people and environment around you, then the question becomes very simple. What frequency are you broadcasting? And more importantly, can you change it on purpose? The answer to the second question is yes, and the research on how to do it is actually very clear. The HeartMath Institute has published over 400 peer-reviewed papers on a technique called heart-focused breathing, and the protocol is almost embarrassingly simple. You bring your attention to the center of your chest, to the area around your heart. You breathe a little slower and a little deeper than normal, roughly 5 seconds in and 5 seconds out. And while you breathe, you generate a feeling of genuine appreciation, gratitude, or care. Not the thought of gratitude, the feeling. When you do this for as little as 2 to 3 minutes, your heart rhythm shifts from erratic to coherent. The jagged, disordered pattern smooths out into a clean sine wave. And that shift in heart rhythm creates a cascade effect. Your brainwaves synchronize with your heart rhythm. Your nervous system shifts from sympathetic activation, fight or flight, to parasympathetic dominance, rest, and repair. Your cortisol drops, your DHEA rises, and your electromagnetic field becomes clean, organized, and strong. In HeartMath's language, you've entered a state of psychophysiological coherence. In the language of this video, you've tuned your broadcast signal. The second technique builds on the first. Once you're in a coherent state, you can use what I call the gratitude coherence loop. Instead of visualizing what you want from a place of wanting, which keeps you in a state of lack, you generate the feeling of already having it. You don't picture the new apartment from the outside looking in. You feel yourself waking up in it. You feel the sunlight on your face through the bedroom window. You feel the texture of the kitchen counter under your hands. This is what Neville Goddard meant when he talked about thinking from the wish fulfilled rather than thinking of it. Thinking of something you want keeps it separate from you. Thinking from it places your nervous system inside the experience, and your body doesn't know the difference between a vividly imagined experience and a real one. Your heart produces the same coherent signature either way. And when your electromagnetic field is broadcasting the signature of the reality you want to inhabit, your RS recalibrates. Your perceptual filter begins matching that signal. Opportunities, people, and events that resonate with that frequency start getting through the filter. Not because you're magically summoning them, because they were always there and your tune system can finally detect them. The third approach involves accessing the theta state directly. Theta, between 4 and 8 Hz, is the brainwave band most associated with neuroplasticity, emotional processing, and what researchers call hypersuggestibility. It's the state your brain enters during deep meditation, during the moments before sleep, and during bilateral stimulation activities like walking, drumming, or EMDR therapy. In Theta, the boundary between your conscious intentions and your subconscious programming becomes thin. Changes you make during Theta tend to stick in ways that affirmations repeated during alert beta consciousness simply don't. This is why Neville Goddard emphasized the moments before sleep. This is why meditation traditions across every culture emphasize still, receptive states of consciousness. They all discovered the same doorway independently. Theta is where you reprogram the signal. The fourth technique is environmental frequency matching, and it's the simplest one of all. Spend time in nature. The Schumann resonance, 7.83 Hz, is strongest in natural settings, away from urban electromagnetic noise. When you spend time among trees, near water, or in open landscapes, your brain waves naturally begin to entrain with the Earth's resonant frequency. Your theta activity increases. Your stress hormones decrease. Your heart coherence improves. Japanese researchers who study the practice of Shinrin-yoku, forest bathing, have documented measurable changes in cortisol, blood pressure, and immune function after as little as 20 minutes of walking in a forest setting. Natural killer cell activity, a marker of immune system strength, increases after time in forests and stays elevated for up to 30 days afterward. What they're measuring is biological entrainment. With the natural electromagnetic environment, your body knows how to do this. It's been doing it for hundreds of thousands of years. The modern world just pulled you away from the signal. And it's not just forests. Bodies of water generate negative ions that have been shown to increase serotonin production and improve mood. Mountain environments above certain elevations produce different electromagnetic conditions that many cultures historically associated with spiritual clarity. The ancient Greeks built temples on mountaintops. Tibetan monasteries sit at extreme altitudes. Indigenous peoples across every continent identified specific natural locations as places of power or healing. They were describing locations where the natural electromagnetic environment was particularly conducive to human coherence, using the language they had available. You don't need a mountain temple. A park bench will do. The mechanism works anywhere the concrete and Wi-Fi signals thin out enough for your nervous system to hear the Earth's baseline frequency again. And the fifth method ties everything together. It's embodied visualization versus mental visualization. The typical approach to visualizing is to sit there thinking hard about what you want. Eyes closed, trying to force a mental picture. And it doesn't work very well because you're doing it in high beta, the brainwave state of effort and analysis. Embodied visualization works differently. You don't just see it. You physically feel it in your body. You stand up, move your body as though the thing has already happened. Feel the emotion in your chest and stomach. Maybe even smile or speak out loud as the version of you who already has it. This engages your proprioceptive system, your vagus nerve, and your mirror neuron network all at once. It creates a far more coherent signal than thinking alone because your entire physiology is participating in the broadcast. Now, you might be wondering why none of this was ever explained to you this way. You went through a decade or more of education and nobody mentioned that your heart generates an electromagnetic field. Nobody told you your brain filters out 99.99% of reality based on your internal state. Nobody connected entrainment, coherence, and the reticular activating system into a single framework that explains why your life seems to respond to your state of being, and the reason is a story in itself. In the 1600s, René Descartes made a deal, not literally, but effectively. He proposed that science should study the material world, everything you can touch and measure, and leave the mind, consciousness, the soul, whatever you want to call it, to the church. This wasn't because Descartes didn't believe the mind was important. He was trying to protect scientific inquiry from religious persecution. If science stayed in its lane, the church would leave scientists alone. That deal worked. Science exploded. Physics, chemistry, biology, engineering, medicine. Everything we've built in the modern world came out of that agreement, but the cost was enormous, because the deal also meant that for the next 4 centuries, any scientist who tried to study the interaction between mind and matter was stepping across the line. They were either doing real science or doing something else: philosophy, religion, pseudoscience. And this created entire generations of researchers who were trained to believe that consciousness is either an illusion, an accident of brain chemistry, or at best a passive observer of material processes. The idea that your internal state could physically influence your external reality was not just unproven, it was unprofessional. Career suicide. Researchers who crossed that line paid the price. Rupert Sheldrake, a Cambridge-trained biologist who proposed morphic resonance, the idea that organisms are shaped by fields of collective memory, was ridiculed by mainstream scientists despite having impeccable academic credentials. A former editor of Nature called his book the best candidate for burning there has been for many years. That was the intellectual climate. Dean Radin at the Institute of Noetic Sciences has published over 300 papers on the measurable effects of consciousness on physical systems. He's run some of the most carefully controlled experiments in the history of consciousness research. Peer-reviewed, replicated, statistically significant, and yet mainstream academia treats his work like it belongs in a different building entirely. The point isn't whether Sheldrake or Radin are right about everything. The point is that the cultural and institutional framework of Western science made it almost impossible to even investigate the question. And that's not science. That's dogma wearing a lab coat. The good news is that framework is crumbling. Neuroscience, quantum biology, and integrative medicine are converging on a picture that would have been considered fringe 20 years ago. The idea that your internal state physically interacts with your external reality through measurable electromagnetic and neural mechanisms is no longer speculation. It's data. And the people who figured this out, centuries before the instruments existed to prove it, the mystics, the meditators, the ancient physicians who talked about energy and harmony and resonance, they weren't making things up. They were describing the same phenomena we're now measuring with fMRI machines and magnetocardiograms. They just used different vocabulary. So where does that leave you? Standing in a world that is far more responsive to your internal state than you were ever taught to believe. Surrounded by people, opportunities, and events that are constantly broadcasting their own frequencies, waiting for a signal that matches. Every coincidence you've experienced wasn't the universe winking at you for fun. It was feedback. A signal that your internal frequency had locked onto something in your environment, that your brain had synced with another brain, that your heart's field had found a resonant match, or that your RAS had finally let through something it had been filtering out for months. The phone that buzzed right when you were thinking about that person. That wasn't random. That was frequency locking. And now that you understand the mechanism, you have a choice you didn't have before. You can keep dismissing these moments as coincidence, or you can start treating them as data, as evidence that your internal state is broadcasting a signal, and that signal is interacting with the world around you in ways you can measure, replicate, and refine. The coincidences aren't going to stop. If anything, once you start paying attention to them, they're going to increase. Not because you're manifesting harder, because your perceptual filter just opened up. You tuned the dial. And now you can hear the station clearly. Pay attention to the next one. The next time someone texts you at the exact moment you think of them. The next time you overhear a stranger saying the exact phrase you needed to hear. The next time an opportunity appears that feels almost too perfect, too well-timed, too precisely matched to what you were internally reaching for. Don't shrug it off. Don't say, "That's so weird," and move on with your day. Stop. Feel the click in your chest. Notice the state you were in when it happened. Were you calm or stressed? Were you clear about what you wanted or scattered across 20 different worries? Were you in your body or trapped in your head? That data is more valuable than any manifestation technique because it shows you your own frequency in real time. Each coincidence is a ping from the field, confirming that your signal found a match. And the more you track these pings, the more you'll start to see the pattern. The same pattern that Huygens saw in his pendulum clocks, the same pattern that fireflies trace across the mangrove forests of Southeast Asia, the same pattern that 2 heart cells find in a petri dish. Oscillating systems that share a medium of communication will always, inevitably, lock into synchronization. You are an oscillating system, and you share a medium with everything around you. The question was never whether frequency locking is real. It's been happening your whole life. The question is whether you're going to keep doing it by accident or start doing it on purpose. If this changed how you think about coincidences, hit subscribe. I break down the science behind consciousness, reality creation, and the mechanisms they never taught you in school every single week.